There is a lesson about power that most people learn far too late. People do not always respect kindness, patience, or forgiveness. Sometimes they respect consequences. You can be generous and still be exploited. You can remain silent and still be disrespected. You can forgive someone again and again, only to teach them that your boundaries have no meaning. And the moment people realize that there is no consequence for crossing you, they stop seeing your kindness as strength and start seeing it as permission. But understand this clearly. Learning to punish people does not mean becoming cruel, violent, or vindictive. It means learning how to respond when someone deliberately violates your boundaries. It means understanding that every action creates a consequence, and that your power begins when you stop rewarding behavior that harms you. The most dangerous mistake you can make is reacting emotionally. Anger makes you predictable. Rage makes you careless. Revenge makes you obsessed with the person who hurt you. Real power operates differently. It observes. It remembers, it calculates, and when the moment comes, it responds with precision. If someone lies to you, you don't need a dramatic confrontation. You change their access to you. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, you stop giving them opportunities to disrespect you. If someone betrays your trust, you don't need to announce your revenge. You simply remove the privileges they once had. This is where most people fail. They threaten consequences but never enforce them. They say, "I'll never tolerate this again," and then accept the same behavior tomorrow. Every empty threat weakens your position. Every consequence you actually enforce strengthens it. So today we are going to explore a darker but necessary principle of human behavior. How to make people understand that crossing your boundaries has a price, not through cruelty, not through uncontrolled revenge, but through discipline, distance, silence, and consequences. Because sometimes the strongest punishment is not hurting someone. It is simply making them lose access to the version of you they thought they could manipulate forever. The moment you stop rewarding disrespect, you begin to change the entire structure of your relationships. Many people complain that others do not respect them, yet they continue giving attention, access, favors, explanations, and second chances to those who repeatedly cross their boundaries. They speak about wanting respect while their actions communicate something completely different. You can treat me badly, and I will still be here. Human behavior responds far more strongly to consequences than to words. If someone discovers that disrespecting you costs them nothing, there is little reason for them to change. This does not mean you should become cruel or spend your life searching for opportunities to hurt people. The strongest consequence is often simple and controlled. You reduce access. You stop explaining yourself. You stop volunteering your energy. You stop rewarding behavior that once received your attention. The person who constantly interrupts your peace no longer receives unlimited access to your time. The person who repeatedly breaks your trust no longer receives the same level of confidence. The person who uses your kindness against you discovers that your kindness is no longer available to them in the same way. This is where boundaries become powerful. A boundary without a consequence is merely a request. You can tell someone, "Do not speak to me that way," but if they continue and you remain present as though nothing happened, your words lose their force. You have demonstrated that the boundary can be crossed without consequence. But when your response is calm and consistent, the message becomes unmistakable. You are not threatening them. You are simply changing their access to you based on their behavior. Many people make the mistake of announcing every consequence. They say, "If you do that again, I will leave." Then the person does it again and they stay. Another warning follows, then another. Eventually, the warnings become meaningless. People learn that your anger has an expiration date. They learn how far they can push before you become emotional, and then they wait for you to calm down. This creates a dangerous pattern because your reactions become predictable, while their behavior remains unchanged. Real discipline requires something different. You do not need to announce every move. You observe patterns. One mistake may deserve understanding. A repeated pattern deserves attention. A deliberate violation deserves a different response. The important distinction is intention and repetition. Someone can make a mistake and genuinely correct it. Another person can repeatedly cross the same boundary because they have learned that you will tolerate it. Treating both situations identically is not kindness. It is a failure to recognize behavior. Your attention is valuable. Your trust is valuable. Your time is valuable. Your presence is valuable. When you give these things to everyone, regardless of how they treat you, you remove their value. But when access to you depends upon behavior, people begin to understand that your presence is not guaranteed. You are teaching them that relationships have standards and that privilege can be lost. The most powerful shift happens internally. You stop asking, "How can I make this person understand what they did to me?" and start asking, "What should their behavior change about my access to them?" That question removes you from emotional revenge and places you back in control. You no longer need them to apologize. You no longer need them to admit that they were wrong. You simply make a decision about what they are allowed to receive from you moving forward. And when you consistently enforce that decision, people begin to recognize something important about you. Your kindness has limits, your patience has limits, your trust has conditions, and your boundaries are not decorations. They are decisions you are prepared to enforce through distance, silence, withdrawal, and the removal of privileges that were once freely available. The most powerful way to respond to someone who repeatedly disrespects you is not always confrontation. Sometimes it is withdrawal. You do not need to raise your voice, create a scene, or prove how deeply they hurt you. You simply remove the access they once had to your attention, your energy, your trust, and your presence. This is one of the most difficult lessons to learn because many people believe that power comes from making others feel their anger. In reality, power often comes from remaining calm enough to decide who deserves continued access to you. When someone becomes accustomed to your constant availability, your attention can become something they take for granted. They message you whenever they want something. They expect you to listen whenever they have a problem. They assume you will forgive them after every betrayal. They become comfortable because they believe your presence is guaranteed. The moment you stop making yourself endlessly available, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, they have to confront the consequences of their own behavior. Withdrawal does not mean disappearing from everyone who disagrees with you. It means recognizing the difference between disagreement and disrespect. Strong people can tolerate criticism. They can listen to uncomfortable opinions. They can admit when they are wrong. But they do not continuously reward manipulation, humiliation, dishonesty, or deliberate boundary violations. They understand that not every person deserves the same level of access to their private thoughts, emotions, time, and attention. Think about your attention as a currency. Every conversation you entertain, every argument you participate in, every explanation you provide, and every emotional reaction you reveal carries a cost. If someone repeatedly provokes you, they may not actually want an answer. They may want your reaction. They want to know that they can disturb your peace whenever they choose. If you continue responding emotionally, you are giving them exactly what they wanted. But when you become difficult to provoke, you take away the reward. Silence can become powerful when it is intentional. Not the childish silence designed to manipulate someone, but the disciplined silence of a person who has decided that certain behavior no longer deserves a response. You do not have to answer every accusation. You do not have to defend every decision. You do not have to convince someone who has already decided to misunderstand you. Sometimes the strongest statement is simply refusing to participate in the game. Distant works in the same way. If someone repeatedly creates chaos around you, you can create space. You can communicate less frequently. You can stop sharing personal information. You can stop seeking their approval. You can stop inviting them into every part of your life. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. Your behavior simply changes because their behavior changed the level of trust between you. This is where many people become uncomfortable. They worry that withdrawing attention will make them look arrogant or cold. They fear being called selfish. They fear that the other person will accuse them of changing. But sometimes changing is exactly what is required. If someone only respects you when you are useful to them, losing their approval is not necessarily a loss. If someone becomes angry because you finally established boundaries, their anger may reveal how much they benefited from having none. The goal is not to make people suffer. The goal is to stop suffering because of people who refuse to change. There is an enormous difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge keeps your attention attached to the person who hurt you. Consequence removes your attention from them. Revenge asks, how can I hurt them? Discipline asks, what access should they no longer have? Once you understand this distinction, your behavior becomes calmer. You stop chasing explanations. You stop begging for apologies. You stop trying to force people to recognize your value. You simply become selective. Those who respect you receive your trust. Those who repeatedly violate that trust experience distance. Those who value your presence receive your presence. Those who abuse your availability discover that your availability is no longer unlimited, and slowly people begin to understand that your attention is not something they can demand. Your trust is not something they can assume, and your presence is not something they are entitled to simply because you once gave it freely, especially when your withdrawal becomes quiet, consistent, and impossible to manipulate. Never punish someone while your emotions are controlling you. Anger can make you feel powerful for a few moments, but it often makes you predictable. When you react immediately, you reveal exactly what affected you, what you fear, and where your emotional weaknesses are. The person who understands how to provoke you can begin controlling your behavior without even realizing it. They push a certain button, you explode, they watch your reaction, and suddenly the situation is no longer about their behavior. It becomes about your response. Real strength begins when you create space between what happens and what you do next. Someone insults you, and you do not immediately respond. Someone betrays you, and you do not rush to confront them. Someone tries to provoke jealousy, anger, or insecurity, and you refuse to give them the satisfaction of seeing you lose control. This pause is not weakness. It is the moment when you regain authority over yourself. Silence can be more powerful than an emotional argument because silence gives you time to observe. When people are angry, they often reveal things they normally hide. They exaggerate, they make accusations, they expose their intentions, they show you what they truly think. If you interrupt that process with an immediate emotional reaction, you may miss valuable information. Sometimes the best response is to listen carefully and remember everything. Timing matters because consequences delivered too quickly can look like revenge. Consequences delivered with discipline look like decisions. If someone crosses a boundary and you immediately try to hurt them, you may simply be reacting. But if you step away, evaluate what happened, recognize the pattern, and then calmly change the relationship, your action carries a different meaning. You are not trying to make them suffer. You are deciding what their behavior has earned. There is also a danger in punishing everyone for every mistake. Human beings make mistakes. People misunderstand each other. Sometimes someone says something thoughtlessly and later recognizes the damage. If you treat every mistake as betrayal, you become impossible to trust yourself. The purpose of consequences is not to create fear around you. It is to create clarity. A person should be able to understand what behavior damaged the relationship and what they need to do differently. This is why controlled consequences are more powerful than emotional punishment. You do not need to humiliate someone publicly. You do not need to spread their secrets. You do not need to destroy their reputation. Those actions can pull you into unnecessary conflict and make you dependent on their reaction. Instead, you can reduce contact, limit personal information, withdraw trust, or simply stop participating in situations where they repeatedly create problems. The most important thing is consistency. If you punish someone one day and reward the same behavior the next, you teach them that your boundaries are temporary. They only have to wait until your anger disappears. But when your response is calm and consistent, the lesson becomes much clearer. They understand that your decisions are not controlled by your mood. Do not announce every consequence either. You do not need to tell everyone. You will regret what you did. Such statements often reveal emotional dependence. A person who is truly finished with a situation does not need to advertise their intentions. They simply change their behavior. They become less available. They stop explaining. They stop giving unnecessary chances. They redirect their attention toward people and environments that deserve it. There will always be people who attempt to provoke you because they want to discover whether they can control you. They may criticize you, mock your decisions, question your worth, or intentionally create conflict just to watch you react. The strongest answer is not always a sharper insult. Sometimes it is the absence of the reaction they were expecting. When you master silence, distance, and timing, you stop giving other people control over your emotional state. You begin to understand that you do not have to respond to everything immediately. You can wait. You can observe. You can choose your moment. And when you finally act, your decision comes from clarity rather than anger, from self-respect rather than revenge, and from control rather than impulse. Leaving the other person to confront the consequences of their own behavior without giving them another opportunity to dictate your next move. One of the most effective consequences you can give someone is allowing them to experience your absence. People often understand the value of something only after they no longer have unlimited access to it. When your attention, trust, support, and presence are always available, others can begin treating them as ordinary. They stop appreciating what they receive because they assume it will always be there. But when someone repeatedly disrespects you and you calmly remove what they once took for granted, the entire dynamic can change. This does not mean disappearing simply to manipulate someone into chasing you. That is not strength. That is another form of dependence because your behavior is still controlled by their reaction. Real withdrawal comes from a decision that their behavior has changed what they are entitled to receive from you. You are not trying to make them desperate. You are simply refusing to continue giving valuable things to someone who consistently treats them without respect. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every minute you spend arguing with someone is a minute you cannot use to build your own life. Every emotional reaction you give to someone who wants to provoke you gives them a piece of your mental energy. Every attempt to convince someone of your worth places your confidence in their hands. The moment you understand this, you become much more selective about who receives your attention. The same principle applies to trust. Trust should not remain at the same level after repeated betrayal. If someone lies to you once, you may forgive them. If they repeatedly lie while expecting the same level of trust, continuing to provide it becomes self-deception. Forgiveness does not require you to restore the same privileges. You can release resentment while still changing the level of access that person has to your life. This distinction is extremely important. Many people believe that if they forgive someone, they must immediately return the relationship to exactly how it was before. That is not necessary. Forgiveness can free you emotionally, while boundaries protect you practically. You can wish someone well and still keep your distance. You can stop hating someone without trusting them again. You can accept an apology without giving someone unlimited opportunities to repeat the same behavior. Your presence also carries value. If someone only contacts you when they need something, disappears when you need support, and returns whenever it benefits them, ask yourself what role you are actually playing in their life. Are you a friend or are you simply a resource? When you stop being constantly available, the answer often becomes obvious. Some people will respect you more. Others will become angry because they can no longer use your availability in the same way. That reaction can reveal more than their words ever could. A person who respects your boundaries may accept your distance, even if they do not like it. A person who depended on having unlimited access may accuse you of changing, becoming selfish, or acting differently. But perhaps you did change. Perhaps you finally recognize that your time and energy require protection. Do not fear becoming less available to people who consistently drain you. You do not owe everyone immediate replies. You do not owe everyone explanations. You do not have to attend every argument, solve every problem, or remain emotionally available to someone who repeatedly creates chaos. Your life becomes more peaceful when you understand that access to you should be earned through mutual respect rather than demanded through familiarity. The deeper lesson is that consequences do not always need to be dramatic. Sometimes the most powerful consequence is simply becoming unavailable for the behavior that once received unlimited tolerance. You stop answering every unnecessary message. You stop explaining the same boundary. You stop sharing your private plans. You stop seeking their approval. You stop offering your deepest trust to someone who has demonstrated that they cannot handle it responsibly. Eventually, the person may notice that something has changed. The conversations become shorter, the invitations become fewer, the personal information disappears, the emotional reactions disappear. The support they once expected is no longer automatic, and they are left to recognize that your presence was not an obligation. It was a privilege created by trust, respect, and mutual understanding, and privileges can disappear when the behavior that supported them disappears as well. People often make the mistake of giving warnings without consequences. They tell someone, "Do not do that again." But when the same behavior happens, nothing changes. Another warning follows, then another, until the warning itself becomes meaningless. When your words are repeatedly disconnected from your actions, people stop taking your boundaries seriously. They learn that you may become angry, but eventually you will return to the same pattern. This is why consequences must be predictable, calm, and consistent. A consequence is not a threat. A threat says, "If you do this, I will hurt you." A consequence says, "If this behavior continues, I will change what I allow." That difference separates emotional revenge from personal discipline. You are not trying to frighten someone into obedience. You are showing them that their choices naturally affect their relationship with you. If someone repeatedly disrespects your time, you do not need to insult them. You simply stop making yourself constantly available. If someone repeatedly breaks your confidence, you stop sharing sensitive information. If someone constantly creates unnecessary arguments, you stop participating in those arguments. If someone takes advantage of your generosity, you stop providing unlimited favors. The response should match the behavior without becoming destructive. Consistency is what gives consequences their power. Imagine telling someone that you will leave a conversation whenever they become insulting, but then staying for another hour every time they insult you. Eventually, your boundary becomes nothing more than a sentence. But if you calmly end the conversation each time the behavior crosses the line, the message becomes clear. You are not arguing about the boundary. You are enforcing it. This also requires emotional discipline. You cannot enforce boundaries only when you are angry. If your consequences disappear once you calm down, people will wait for your emotions to settle before returning to the same behavior. Your standards must exist even when your anger is gone. That is when people begin to understand that your decisions are not temporary reactions, but permanent changes in what you are willing to tolerate. You should also avoid making consequences larger than the offense. Not every mistake deserves permanent separation. Not every disagreement deserves punishment. Not every criticism deserves withdrawal. If someone makes an honest mistake and takes responsibility, there may be no reason to create a lasting consequence. But when someone repeatedly crosses the same boundary after being clearly told, the pattern becomes different. Repetition turns an isolated mistake into a choice. The strongest people understand the difference between correction and retaliation. Correction is designed to protect your standards. Retaliation is designed to satisfy your anger. One creates stability, the other often creates more conflict. When your goal is simply to make someone suffer, you remain emotionally connected to them. You continue thinking about what they deserve, how they might react, and whether they feel bad enough. But when your goal is to protect your peace, your attention returns to yourself. You also do not need everyone to agree with your consequences. Some people will call you cold. Some will say you have changed. Some may accuse you of thinking you are better than them. Their reaction does not automatically mean your boundary is wrong. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may naturally dislike your new standards. Their discomfort can be evidence that the old arrangement worked in their favor. Do not negotiate against yourself just because someone becomes angry when you enforce a limit. If you have decided that a certain behavior is unacceptable, you must be prepared to act when it happens. Otherwise, you are teaching people that pressure can make you abandon your own standards. The more consistently you honor your own boundaries, the less often you will need to explain them. There is a quiet strength in becoming predictable about what you tolerate. People do not have to guess what will happen when they cross a line. They know that disrespect produces distance, dishonesty produces reduced trust, manipulation produces reduced access, and repeated betrayal produces separation. You are not creating fear. You are creating clarity. When people understand that actions have consequences, they become more careful about how they treat you. And when someone refuses to change despite knowing the consequences, you gain another piece of information. The problem was never that they did not understand your boundary. The problem was that they did not value the relationship enough to respect it, which tells you exactly how much access, trust, attention, and energy you should continue giving them. The final level of personal power is becoming difficult to manipulate. Many people believe they need to become tougher, colder, or more aggressive in order to protect themselves, but real strength is often much quieter. It comes from knowing exactly what you will tolerate, what you will forgive, and what you will no longer allow into your life. When you understand your own standards, other people have far less ability to control you through guilt, pressure, fear, flattery, or emotional games. Manipulation works best when you are desperate for someone's approval. If you cannot tolerate someone being disappointed in you, they can use disappointment as a weapon. If you are terrified of being abandoned, someone can threaten to leave whenever they want something from you. If you constantly need to be understood, someone can deliberately misunderstand you until you begin explaining yourself endlessly. The more emotionally dependent you become on another person's reaction, the more influence they gain over your decisions. This is why self-respect must become stronger than the desire to be liked. You cannot build a powerful life while constantly asking everyone else for permission to protect your peace. Someone may call you selfish because you said no. Someone may accuse you of changing because you stopped accepting disrespect. Someone may tell you that you are cruel because you finally refuse to solve problems that they repeatedly created themselves. You have to learn to hear these accusations without immediately abandoning your standards. Forgiveness is another area where manipulation often appears. Some people use apologies as a reset button. They hurt you, apologize, receive forgiveness, and then repeat the same behavior. After enough repetitions, the apology becomes meaningless because nothing changes afterward. Forgiveness should not automatically restore access. An apology may deserve acknowledgement, but trust is rebuilt through consistent behavior over time. You can forgive someone without giving them the same position in your life. You can release anger without handing them your confidence again. You can stop carrying resentment while still remembering the lesson. Memory is not hatred. Sometimes remembering how someone behaved is simply how you prevent yourself from making the same mistake twice. Do not allow guilt to force you into relationships that your judgment has already told you to reconsider. Manipulative people often turn boundaries into moral accusations. They may say, "After everything I've done for you," or "I can't believe you would treat me this way," attempting to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. But gratitude does not create permanent ownership. Someone helping you in the past does not give them unlimited rights over your future. You also become harder to manipulate when you stop explaining yourself excessively. The more explanations you provide, the more material someone has to argue with. You say no, and they ask why. You explain. They challenge your reason. You provide another explanation, they challenge that one too. Soon, you are defending a decision that did not require their approval in the first place. Sometimes a simple, "I am not comfortable with that" is enough. Your behavior should become more important than your promises. Do not tell someone 10 times that you will stop tolerating a particular behavior. Show them through your actions. If they cross the boundary, respond consistently. If they respect it, the relationship can continue. If they refuse, create more distance. This removes the endless cycle of arguments and replaces it with something much clearer. There is also power in refusing to retaliate against every person who hurts you. Not everyone deserves your revenge. Some people deserve nothing more than your absence. The greatest victory may be refusing to allow their behavior to transform you into someone you do not respect. You do not need to become cruel because someone was cruel to you. You do not need to become dishonest because someone lied to you. You do not need to become manipulative because someone tried to manipulate you. Your goal is not to control other people. Your goal is to become so disciplined that other people's behavior cannot easily control you. When someone praises you, you remain grounded. When someone criticizes you, you remain grounded. When someone leaves, you remain grounded. When someone returns with promises, you observe their actions rather than becoming intoxicated by their words. Your emotional stability becomes your shield. Once you stop needing everyone to approve of your choices, manipulation loses much of its power. Once you stop confusing forgiveness with unlimited access, betrayal becomes easier to recognize. Once you stop confusing kindness with weakness, you can remain generous without becoming vulnerable to exploitation. And once you understand that every relationship has limits, you become capable of giving trust without surrendering your judgment, offering forgiveness without abandoning your memory, and walking away without needing to destroy the person you leave behind.